Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到北美韭菜日记，我是九九。这两天股市币圈真的是刺激，周一那天双经历了应该是这几个月以来的最大跌幅，然后周二、周三这两天又都开始在慢慢回血了。上期视频里，咱们也从链上数据分析的角度回顾了比特币的基本面，也是想安抚一下大家的情绪。今年519之后才入坑的币圈的新朋友，可能还没有见过这种阵势，也是习惯了就好了。那么今天的这期视频，咱们主要是来看一看美股之后的走势，也是必须美股币圈两手抓，这也是咱们频道的一大特色。目标就是要做到股票博主里最懂币圈的，币圈博主里最懂美股的。不过说实话，我感觉预测美股大盘走势要比预测比特币走势要难多了。币圈这边还有比特币4年减半周期做指引，起码过去几次牛熊交替基本上就是围绕这个事件发生的。但是股市走熊走牛看的主要是经济基本面，不过经济学又不是一门严谨科学，基本面到底怎么样时刻都是在变化的，经济学家们自己也预测不了，更何况是咱们普通股民们。这次大跌之后，我关注的两个机构投资人在接受 CNBC 采访的时候，针对之后的大盘走势就给出了两个截然相反的看法。一个是摩根斯丹利的首席战略师 Mike Wilson， 他说美股要经历一次 20% 的回调，对标普500的年终目标价是4000点。另外一个也是咱们频道的常客，叫做 Tom Lee， 是一家投资咨询公司的创始人。他说这次回调只是暂时性的，美国经济基本面依旧强劲。他对标普的年终目标价是4600点。一起来看一下他们各自在采访里是怎么说的，中间也会穿插一些我自己的看法。首先是看空市场的 Mike Wilson。And
then there's our friend Mike Wilson, Morgan Stanley's chief market strategist. He joins us now, who says a 20% correction seems more likely. What happened at 10%? You get a bad day and now you have to up it to 20?
这里大家肯定好奇说，这个主持人 Scott 怎么口气这么冲，对待嘉宾完全不讲礼貌。等一下我会解释。
Well, thanks, Scott. I mean, look, it's our base case is still 10%, and look, a lot of commentary I agree with that was just said on the show. I mean, you're not going to time these things perfectly. We're in a position to make these tactical calls, and we've had a view that the index is going to end the year at 4,000. Okay, I don't know when that's going to correct, and we're going to end at 4,000, but I have high conviction that that's where we're going to end because that's what our process tells us. Now, we also try to make money within the market, right? There's never a time to sell everything. That's never been the call. And I think the most important thing to have gotten right this year, and what's going to be important to get right the rest of this year, is what do you own within the market? Okay. So obviously we had a huge cyclical rotation at the beginning of the year. At that point, we made the call that we're going to go through this mid-cycle transition, have a bit of a rolling correction. That played out. We made the quality bet, which is essentially the FANG stocks. That's the NASDAQ 100 and S&P 500. That's what those are. Those are the highest quality indices in the world. And then to Josh's point, when they get to those names eventually, you're getting closer to the end. We're down 5% intraday yesterday. Can we get another 5%? I think the answer is yes.
Why? We rallied off that, though. Doesn't that tell? What does it say, though, that we rallied off of the lowest level yesterday, and we are getting some level of a bounce today? That pattern is fairly true to form. Anytime we've had a pullback of substance, it's been bought. So why is this going to be different?
Well, I think the trend broke. Okay, so we did eventually we took out the 50-day moving average. Everybody was telling me was never going to break, and it broke violently yesterday. I think you got to pay attention to that. I respect the market, and I would suggest other people respect the market. And the message in that, what that's saying, is that trend was challenged, and we have not regained that 50-day moving average yet. We'll see. It could happen. Okay, I'm just not rushing back in at the index level. That's not been our call for the last 6 months. We've been very focused on individual stocks and sectors. And that's why our portfolios are beating the S&P by 200 basis points this year. So, I'm comfortable with our call. I'm very comfortable that the market's going to end lower than here by the end of this year for a lot of different reasons that we discussed, whether it's decelerating growth, it's the Fed moving towards tapering. You can blame it on Evergrande. You can blame it on all kinds of things. It's not the point. The point is that the whole process suggests to us that the fair value of the market at the end of the year will be about 4,000.
这次采访我感觉火药味还是挺足的。主持人先是讽刺说，你之前不是说要回调 10% 吗？今天是不是心情不太好就上调成 20% 了？然后 Mike Wilson 刚开始还挺和气的，后来感觉也憋不住火了，说他建议所有人都要尊重市场。但是大家肯定也发现了，在这段采访里 Mike Wilson 一直说根据他们的市场调研需要一次 20% 左右的回调，所以标普500的年终目标价是4000，但是自始至终也并没有给出他的理由。我在网上看到一篇文章，也是这位大哥的观点，美股暴跌 20% 的可能性增大，市场正处于冰与火的岔路口。 说的也是非常的玄乎，一篇市场调研报告，感觉《冰与火之歌》都要整出来了。报告里称，典型周期中期火的情形就是美联储开始缩减货币宽松，以应对经济过热，将导致标普500指数适度且健康的回调 10%。By the way， 今天美联储也是刚开完会，说缩减货币宽松计划可能很快会实施。目前来看的话，市场也并没有出现过激的反应。然后说，然而冰的情形就是在需求前移、供应量问题和利润率压力下，盈利修正和更高频的宏观数据减速，这个情况看起来更有可能，并可能导致更具破坏性的结果，即 20% 以上的修正。麦克·威尔森这位大哥可能很多观众都不熟悉，猛地一听他喊的 20% 的回调都吓出一身冷汗。如果大盘真回调个 20% 的话，那持仓内的个股不得直接被腰斩了吗？先不要慌，非常不巧，我之前就做过一期关于这位大哥的节目，时间是今年的4月30日，也就是说在今年4月份的时候，麦克·威尔森这位大哥就已经说市场处于牛熊交替的关键点位上了，有可能要经历 10% 到 20% 的左右回调。4月末到现在，大家可以看一下大盘又上涨了多少。一起来看一下我那期视频里的一个片段。
But Morgan Stanley sees trouble ahead. Chief U.S. strategist Mike Wilson is predicting the S&P will tumble 10 to 20% in the next 3 months. Mike joins us now. Mike, great to have you with us.
Great, thank you for having me.
You've been cautious for a while, and you say that you've been getting it wrong. What makes you think that this time around the correction is actually going to happen?
当时主持人说他已经看空市场，喊了好几个月了，但是也并没有出现他所说的 10% 以上的回调。所以如果这样看的话，他可能是在去年就已经开始在看空市场了。大家可以再看一下，从去年开始大盘又上涨了多少。如果你是因为担心 10% 以上的回调就一键清仓的话，中间又会损失多少的机会成本。大摩这边看空市场最核心的一个点就是他们提出的 mid-cycle transition， 类似是说牛熊交接时候要发生的一轮大调整。他们也是通过过去的历史数据得出来的结论，每次出现经济衰退之后由熊转牛的时候，都会有一次超过 10% 到 20% 的回撤。这种级别的回撤自去年3月以来是并没有出现过的。去年9月份那次也就是刚刚触及了 10%， 所以他们一直在等的也就是这个。其他所有的冰啊火啊之类的，不管是市场给出什么样的理由，总而言之他就是觉得一定要看到这种级别的回撤，如果看不到的话，他可能会一直持续看空市场。这也是为什么 CNBC 的几位主持人对他都这么不礼貌的原因了，可能也是觉得他这种逻辑性不是很强的看空言论太不靠谱了，连续喊了1年了，哪怕是最后真出现了，我是不知道这种观点是有没有给任何人起到指导意见的。 OK， 聊完看空市场的，咱们再来听听大多头 Tom Lee 的看法。他也是我频道的老观众了，年初的时候给标普的目标价是4200点，结果到了6月的时候就提前完成了。然后他根据当下的市场情绪以及经济基本面又上调了目标价到4600点，而且在大概去年10月份的时候 Tom Lee 也是率先捕捉到了今年年初时候的成长股到价值股之间的板块轮动，大力唱多了能源和金融股。所以总体上来说的话呢，我觉得这位大哥的意见还是值得一听的，起码是比 Mike Wilson 要靠谱一些。 OK， 一起来看采访。
Let's bring in Tom Lee now, co-founder of Fundstrat Global Advisors and a CNBC contributor for more on the markets. Tom, good to have you with us. What did you make of today? I mean, you're a bull. Let's put that out there. Everybody knows that. But the failure to bounce today, did that make you rethink where we are in the markets in terms of market sentiment?
I think the market held up incredibly well today. This Evergrande is the biggest shock to hit financial markets since COVID. And in a way, it's scarier because it involves quite a lot of debt and, an obscure world. I think as people look at Evergrande, it involves a lot of leveraged products and off-balance sheet and SPVs. And, so I think the fact that the small caps actually rallied today and the NASDAQ and the S&P managed to hold flat shows that the shock of yesterday was really the big impulse. And today is a little bit of the ripple effect. So I would say I think it's quite constructive, actually.
Okay, so you think it's constructive, but at the same time, for all the reasons that you laid out, why the market action was constructive, because Evergrande is this hairy problem that we have. We don't know how that's going to pan out. Isn't that a reason to be cautious about the markets longer term, since we don't know how this will play out, and we don't necessarily know either the impact on not just the Chinese economy, but even the sentiment of the Chinese consumer. Unlike our markets, the Chinese retail investor plays a big part in the markets over there. A lot of wealth is tied up in the markets from households, and losing a lot of money can really have an impact on the psychology there and then, therefore, the economy.
Yes. In a way, yesterday was a big shock to equity markets. But as you know, if you look at financial conditions, they actually barely budged. Oil barely moved. The 10-year barely budged. And even currencies barely moved. So this was sort of a shock that hit equity markets globally. And as everything you've described, I think, is correct. In Asia, a lot of people have money tied up in property or digital assets now, much more than financial stocks. And if I think about what that kind of means is I think we're just seeing the aftershock of retail investors largely who've been negative. They've been withdrawing money from equities for 6 of the last 7 weeks, and AAII sentiment was the worst reading last week for all of 2020. In fact, the worst since September 2020.
这里和大家快速解释一下他提到的 AAII 指标，这个指标我也是第一次听说，稍微调查了一下，感觉还是挺有参考价值的。全称是 The American Association of Individual Investors， 是美国散户协会创办的一个指标，追踪的就是散户投资人的情绪指数，有点像是恐惧贪婪指数，但是恐惧贪婪指数反映的是大盘整体的市场情绪，包括机构还有散户。这个 AAII 指标则是只针对散户的。这是过去1年里的一些数据，黄色的线是看多的散户，蓝色的是看空的散户，红色的线是保持中立的。可以看到，看多的散户人数比例，也就是黄色的线，截止到上周已经下降到了只有 22.45% 了。就像汤姆利所说的，已经达到了1年以来的最低值了。最高的时候是去年的11月中旬，今年的4月初以及7月初。看空人数的比例，也就是蓝色的这条线，最近是在稳步上升的。现在的数值已经到了今年的最高点了，将近 40%。我知道咱们很多朋友炒股喜欢说散户反买别墅靠海，所以这个 AAII 指标介绍给你，可以跟着反买试验一阵子，然后记得回来告诉我效果怎么样。OK， 继续来看采访。
I think we're just seeing the aftershock of retail investors largely who've been negative. They've been withdrawing money from equities for 6 of the last 7 weeks, and AAII sentiment was the worst reading last week for all of 2020. In fact, the worst since September 2020. So you've got a really sort of cautious, nervous retail market that I think kind of panicked yesterday. Institutions, I think, haven't really, dived in because they're expecting aftershocks, and they think if it's like long-term capital or Lehman, like that it's going to take some while to repair. So I think in a way the markets being flat today is actually a pretty good outcome. So again, I think we're still in a position where I think ultimately stocks are going to rally hard off this, and it's ultimately because unless Evergrande is going to cause a real seismic effect on the U.S. economy, I think the U.S. fundamentals are in good shape.
Hey, Tom, it's Karen. Thanks for being on. So turning to the U.S. fundamentals, I mean, even though the market's not off that much, we had a lot of sectors, as Dan was saying earlier, that are really, commodities really getting hit, industrials, financials. If you're bullish, where of the sectors, what do you like?
We've been looking at this sector relative strength recently, and we're going to talk about that tonight. And I would say it looks like the market's actually trying to decide what's going to be a battleground, because I think FANG isn't as strong as it looks, and I think cyclicals like industrials and financials and generally domestically oriented companies are actually holding pretty well. So I think that this is a time where the market is waiting. Investors are waiting for the market to tell them where the strength's going to be. But our guess is that if the economy's continues to be in good shape, which is our base case, and COVID's retreating, then I think you really want to have a cyclical tilt into year end.
总结一下汤姆利的采访，就是恒大事件在情绪面上对股市造成的影响是很有可能大于它的实际影响的。当然了，前提是中国政府能够出手，不至于说因为一家公司负债还不上，然后引发世界范围内金融系统的连锁反应。这次的回调对于我个人来说，情绪上的影响，说实话是没有3月和5月的那次大的。前2次回调就是大盘没怎么跌，但是我的投资组合感觉又经历了一次去年3月份的股灾，这次起码是大家一起下跌。而且我持仓内的很多成长股，包括特斯拉、Square、Palantir、C 这些股票，最近2个多月的表现还都是比较强势的。周一大跌之后，这2天回血也还不错，所以暂时来看的话还 OK。我自己对大盘下半年的看法，总体上来说还是看涨的。目前来看，最大的黑天鹅事件就是恒大事件的后续，反而像美联储 QE 加息这些，我个人倒不会特别担心。 因为我感觉对于这两件事，这半年的时间里已经被讨论的太多了，基本上已经被市场 price in 了。而且股市在目前这种脆弱的状况下，我也不认为美联储会不合时宜的把这些事件提前然后砸盘。OK， 这期视频发出来可能是周三晚上或者是周四白天了。这周末要和家人一起在夏天结束之前在户外露营一次，也顺便和各位观众们请个假。下次见面可能要到下周了，也提前预祝大家都能度过一个美好的周末。那本期视频就暂时先带来到这里了。如果给你带来一些收获的话，走之前千万不要忘记留下一个赞好。没帮助的话，也可以订阅一下这个频道，我保证下期视频一定会对你有所帮助。我们下期视频再见，拜了个拜。
是什么？